Talk to the microphone. Very good. In case you don't know me, my name is Hannes. Mark is over here. Many years ago, we came up with this daft idea of making a new database. We're very happy that people sort of seem to care. Today, we're going to have a very exciting program for DuckCon here in the Egyptian cinema. So this is now, we're going to start with Mark and me giving a bit of an overview, how we're thinking about things, how we're thinking about the project progressing. Mark is going to give you a preview on the next version of DuckDB. Then we're going to have a talk from Francis about Mother Duck. We're going to have a bunch of two lightning talks by Jan and Andy. And then there's going to be a second session where we have another talk about performant data apps by Robert. We're going to have a talk about pgDuckDB by Joe, and then more lightning talks by Miguel, Brian, Richard, Edward, and Unite. And afterwards, and this is obviously a part that's very important to us, is that we're going to have drinks and snacks, and grateful that Mother Duck has agreed to sponsor. And that's really also the thing that it's really nice to have this opportunity to talk to members of the team who are here. You can recognize the DuckDB team members with the yellow name tag, and just also among each other. I think we have really great experience from these sort of drinks and snacks sessions in the previous DuckCons, where people can just tell each other about their favorite SQL query. I don't know. I don't know what you talk about. Okay, so let me get started with the DuckDB overview and latest development. This is a big screen. I'm a bit overwhelmed by this. Okay. So we start, as is tradition, with a sort of state of the duck. We used to call it state of the duck, a bit of observations of where we are with DuckDB. Talking a bit about how the adoption is going of DuckDB. And then, indeed, the next step is the part that Mark's going to talk about is where we're going, where we think we should be going with DuckDB and what is planned for the next release, 1.1.0. I still have to scream in my mind that you shouldn't start with 0 anymore because it was, 6 years of 0 dot something. It's 1 dot something. Okay, fine. All right. Yay, DuckDB. For those of you who don't know what DuckDB is, it's a in-process analytical data management system. And it's really the first custom-built in-process analytical data management system, which is kind of an accident. We didn't really set out to make a new category, but there we are. And yeah, it's free and open source. People really enjoy using it. But I wanted to briefly give you a bit of a sort of some of the thoughts behind like the motivation, the vision maybe. And I've tried to boil it down into 2 words. So from just giving courses, talking to people, all this stuff, we have learned that people generally fear data, okay? Because data sets, they can be unruly, right? You're going to have that wrong comma in line 400,000 or something like that. Data generally is feared, in my experience, when it stops fitting into Excel, once you can no longer scroll through it. And then the other problem is that the tools that people generally use or have been using before DuckDB, the tools people generally are using to look at data or to wrangle with data, they tended to be, I think, hostile is the right word, right? In the sense of like hard to use, hard to install, hard to set up, hard to make happy, hard to configure, hard to not give you a giant stack trace. But we really want to move this towards confidence, where we can basically create the tools that give people the confidence that they should not be intimidated by data sets, right? Data sets should just be harmless. It should be just like a movie file or so. You just throw it in FFM in VLC and it's going to be fine, right? Nobody's afraid of movie files anymore. And we kind of want to get to the same point with this unwieldy collection of CSV files that you have. So don't fear that CSV. I also wanted to sort of give an overview of what we kind of can see in terms of use cases for DuckDB, right? So there's 3 kind of main use cases that we can see at the moment. And the first one is kind of the one that we started with, I think. That we started thinking about making DuckDB for this interactive analysis use case, where there's an analyst sitting in front of a computer with a data set and just trying to ask some questions, right? And that kind of inspired a lot of the early design decisions for the in-process architecture, for the zero dependencies, and so on and so forth. And it's a quite, popular use case, right? Yesterday I was at the POSITConf and talked about, how R users can use DuckDB and Python users can use DuckDB, and they're really happy because the tools are generally not as capable. But then we were really surprised because people started using DuckDB in the second main use case, where it's a component in sort of gigantic data pipelines. So imagine some enterprise data use case, and they have like 15 steps that the data set goes through, and one of them is DuckDB. And that's really a novel thing, because in the past you couldn't just stick a Spark cluster into a pipeline, right? That doesn't work. But with DuckDB, of course, you can just spin up a DuckDB instance and just do some minor transformation, like use a single relational operator. That's perfectly fine. And the third sort of use case that we see, I called creative architectures. It's also really cool to see that. we haven't really expected that. And that's kind of when people stick a data management systems into places where nobody has tried before. So, for example, on your mobile device, right? You can't just install Postgres on an iPhone. I think that's well known. You can't run a Spark on an iPhone either. You can put DuckDB in a Lambda function. That's really exciting. You can run DuckDB in a browser. You can run DuckDB on a satellite in space. There's a ton of use cases that have really surprised us, that are kind of breaking up the traditional data architecture, from your university days, your two-tier architecture, client server, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of being broken up, and it's really exciting for me to see that. So that's kind of the first, the architectures are the use cases that we can see. Next, I want to talk a bit about adoption. And the first time at DuckCon, you will not notice, but we're doing this kind of endless sort of recursion in the previous adoption slides. Yeah, so you can almost the first one you can just see some pixels here. The screen is very big. Yeah? But the last one is from January 2024, and it's totally crazy. I have to say I have never expected anything like it. So we are now at just with the Python client, we're above 6 million downloads per month. Right? This is totally mind-blowing, and if you look at the numbers from January this year, it was 2 million then. Okay. Then DuckDB has this extension ecosystem where people can just install random extensions, and that used to be 5 million per month, is now 17 million per month. We are very happy that Cloudflare likes us still, because, I think it's on the order of 200 terabytes a month or so at the moment. Our website, we accidentally made one of the more popular websites in our country with 600,000 unique web visitors per month. GitHub stars have been going up. LinkedIn followers is one of the more surprising number. We went from 6,000 to 23,000, which is, I think, also a Gabor's sort of work on promoting DuckDB on LinkedIn. And most importantly, the DB engines ranking, right? The only thing that really matters. Went up to 10 points in the relational ranking, which is really exciting to see, right, for our sort of scrappy little software project. Pushed the wrong button, I'm sorry. This thing is the history, the development of GitHub stars. I'm happy to report that the verticalness has stopped a little bit because it was getting a bit too ridiculous, right? So there was just this 3-month period, I think, around the DuckDB 1.0 release, where it just went up straight, and nobody believed us, right? They said, you're buying stars. We are not, swear to God. Speaking about 1.0, we're so exciting for us that we have finally managed to release DuckDB 1.0. And it's even more exciting that still nobody has found like a catastrophic bug in it. So when we were like pushing out 1.0, it's like, you have this anxiety. It was like, okay, 5 minutes later, somebody will be like, oh, by the way, the joins are broken or something like that, right? Didn't happen. It's still out there, and it's still working really well. I'd like to hint at something. We put an Easter egg in the 1.0 release, and nobody has found it yet. So if you're, if you want to look for it, then it's there. What also is happening that people are writing books about DuckDB. There's 3 now, which is also kind of wild to see that. We haven't been involved in writing the books. Other people write books about DuckDB. It's totally wild. And there's 3 now. I think more are in the works. And finally, after years of rating, we have a Wikipedia page. So that's, they fought us tooth and nail, but we actually didn't do anything, right? Like the point of Wikipedia is that you're not allowed to create a Wikipedia page about your own stuff. So we haven't done it. Somebody else has done this. We don't know whom. But of course, Wikipedia couldn't resist of putting the angry, passive-aggressive marketer. So if you want to help, add some, need additional citations. So add some citations and we can maybe remove this. Okay. And from my side, lastly, I just wanted to point out that DuckDB is not VC funded. It's the company that employs the core contributors to the project, DuckDB Labs, does fund the whole show by offering commercial support contracts and consulting contracts, but the support contracts are basically privileged access to the DuckDB team and high priority issues and a sort of deadline on by which time we have to respond. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, you can talk to me, but I just wanted to put it out there because this is the way how we pay for everything. And with that, I want to hand over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you all. It's very nice that you could all make it out here. It's very exciting to be here. I'm going to give a bit of an overview about, where we're going with DuckDB, like some of the things we've been working on, some of the recent developments, some of our future outlook, and give a bit of a sneak peek of the next release, which is actually happening in 3 weeks, I think, in early September. So one thing that I want to talk about that we're very excited about is extensions. So DuckDB has had extensions for a very long time, I think years at this point. And we have been building these extensions. And the initial motivation behind why we made extensions was actually ties into one of the core reasons why we made DuckDB in the first place, which is that we wanted to keep the core system simple to use, simple to install, and simple to set up. And unfortunately, at some point, you're going to need OpenSSL, and that is not any of those. But still, of course, there's a lot of useful functionality behind that. That is critical for using, internet connectivity, S3 connections, etc. That was the initial reason why we made extensions. And we have been building a lot of these ourselves. So I'm sure all of you have used them either knowingly through the install and load interface or accidentally, because actually a lot of our core functionality like the Parquet reader and the JSON reader are also extensions. And over the past few years, as we've been working on the extensions, we have been making it possible to extend anything, including like crazy things like extending the parser. You can add new functions, add new aggregations, add new file systems. You can do a lot of cool stuff. There have been actually some people that were crazy enough to make their own extensions even before we were thinking about that, which is one of the reasons why we thought, hey, maybe there's something to it. But the problem was always that you had to run these as unsigned. You had to allow unsigned extensions. You had to self-host them. And we figured, we kind of want to actually support this. Also because we kind of realized that, we can do a lot of stuff, obviously, but in the end, we can't do everything and solve every single use case as a small company. And it's very nice also to, as a user, feel that you're able to extend it and provide maybe that last missing bit of information or a functionality that you need. So we're very excited to announce community extensions. And so there's this website that you can visit. There's also a link on our official website. Community extensions are really cool because you can build your own extension. You can basically just send us a PR to register the extension, and then people can use it. So there's this like very simple syntax that's described here, where you basically say install the extension from community. So that's like the repository, and then you can load it and you can use your new functionality. And there's already a bunch of them. So one of the cool ones is the H3 extension that you can already install and use today. And that allows you to use this H3 format and indexing structures. So that's really cool. And we're, well, obviously hoping that more and more people build these extensions to really like further the things that you can do with DuckDB. So if you're interested in this, you can go to the extension templates repository, which is a template that has been created by one of our engineers, by Sam. And it's quite cool. You can just create a new repository based on this template, start writing up some, I don't know, some functions, some aggregations, something simple. After that, you can send a PR to us, to the community extensions repository that has like one of these descriptor files. So this is an example of the H3 extension that I said before. And it's like, yeah, quite simple. You just link to where the code is hosted, GitHub revision, and some documentation, and it'll end up on our website and installable. And we'll do all the GitHub CI, we'll do all the sort of like building distribution for all the different platforms for you. And one of the cool things we are also currently working on, so currently all these extensions are mostly written in the C++, using C++, which is the same language that DuckDB itself is written in. But we're doing a push towards a stable C API that allows you to do many of the same things you can do in C++. And what's kind of cool about that, because C is like this kind of foundational language for computer programs, is that allows you to then build extensions in other languages using that API as well. And one of the first languages we're targeting for that is Rust. So very soon you'll be able to write your extensions within Rust as well, submit them and have them distributed using the community extensions framework. So we're very excited about that. Another thing I want to briefly mention that we've been working on is pgDuckDB. So this is a project we've been working on together with Hydra and MotherDuck, and Joe from Hydra will give a presentation about this later. And it's kind of cool. It allows you to run DuckDB within Postgres. So we've had the Postgres scanner for a while that allows you to connect your DuckDB instance to Postgres, pull the data from your Postgres instance to DuckDB. This is kind of neat because it pushes DuckDB into your Postgres instance, allowing you to do, well, a lot of cool stuff you can do with DuckDB right inside your Postgres instance and mixing and matching it with the stuff you can do in Postgres. So yeah, it will be another presentation on that in a bit. Then I want to talk a bit about the next DuckDB release. It's called the Etoni, after the duck, the Eton's pintail, if I'm pronouncing that right. It's a duck that's native to the to a bunch of islands in the Indian Ocean. It's a very pretty duck, as you can see. Very nice duck. And this will be released in a few weeks in September. And we'll just, there's a lot of features here, a lot of performance improvements, a lot of bug fixes, but I kind of want to go over like some quick highlights in the presentation. So one of the things that we have always been focusing on is, well, friendly SQL. So like making it easy to do cool stuff or like nice analytics in SQL. So one of the things that that will be included in this release is the histogram function. And this function is quite neat because it allows you to very quickly get, well, it's kind of in the name, a histogram of a column from within a table. And it's very easy to use. You just point it at, well, it could be a bunch of Parquet files, could be a table. And it gives you like this nice little overview of the data distribution from within your column. And you can use that for any type, any table. It all works kind of automatically. And yeah, I think that's pretty neat. One thing that's actually quite simple, but I think is actually kind of an enabler for a lot of complex, like dynamic SQL, is the query and query table functions. So these functions conceptually are quite simple. They turn a string, so like a varchar, into either a table scan or into a query. So it's a bit like eval for databases, but not actually quite so dangerous. And what's nice about this is these functions they allow you to write, for example, like macros or functions that execute dynamically over different tables. So, and the histogram function that I just showed is actually based on this functionality. So here, for example, you can see here I'm creating a macro that gives me the top n, so the top 3 values of each column in that table. And you can kind of see like how dynamic you can make these kind of macros now. So the table name is an input here, right? And that gets pushed into this query table thing that turns this string into an identifier. Then you can see I'm using the columns expression that automatically expands to all of the columns in the table. And the 3 I've hard-coded here could also be a parameter. And you can see that gives you then the top 3 of all of the columns in the table, right? So you can do a lot of like cool dynamic SQL with these kind of things. It's also something that actually comes back a bit to the community extensions. So one of the ideas we've had as well is to allow you to write community extensions with only SQL. And by making it possible to write these kind of functions within that essentially only use SQL, you can do quite a lot of stuff with that. A bit in the same vein, this release is going to include SQL level variables. And that allows you to basically set variables from, for example, you can set them to constants, of course, to literals, but you can also read these variables from tables, from files, or anything else, right? You can run a query to set these variables. And that's conceptually quite simple, but it's quite cool because this allows you to do something that was previously not really possible, which is do dynamic reading of files. So for example, what I can do now with this is I can get my list of, well, CSV files or what have you from another table, from another query, from a file. And then I can push that into the read CSV function. And I can basically just get a list of files to read from a table, from another file, from a text file that I have on my system. So that's, one of those other things that you can do even more with SQL now. Similarly, on the dynamic SQL front, we've had the column syntax for a while that allows you to do dynamic stuff over a bunch of columns in a table. So you can use like a regular expression, a lambda function to select which columns you want to operate on. In this release, we're going to get the ability to also unpack those columns, which is kind of like a Python-esque way of saying you can get all the columns that you list here, and you can unpack them so they become function arguments to the same function instead of expanding to multiple function calls. So for example, here you can see I'm using the columns function to select these 2 columns from this data set, the arrival delay and arrival delay minutes. And then here I'm unpacking them into this greatest function, which then gives me the greatest of these 2 numbers. So that allows even more dynamic SQL. There's also a lot of cool stuff we've been doing on the performance front. So one of the things I want to highlight is the dynamic push down of filters from joins. So that's kind of a mouthful maybe if you're not too familiar with all of those things. But essentially what it means is that if you're doing a join or like one of the selections from a subquery, like an in clause, anything like that, which gets translated into a join, what we can do now is we can basically, in the build phase of the hash join, we can scan what rows have come in there and dynamically generate filters that then get pushed back into the sequential, into the scan on the other end, in the probe ends, right? And that allows for some great speedups in some of these workloads, especially if you have like Parquet files or DuckDB files that are like partitioned, that have zone maps. Because then we can skip reading most of the data. So if you have like let's say a high partitioned Parquet file, or even a normal Parquet file, just a single Parquet file with the row groups, we can skip reading many of the rows in some of these cases, which can offer great speedups. The CSV reader, it's always it's this never-ending thing. The amount, the variety of CSV files continues to amaze. But yeah, we've been making even more improvements to the CSV reader. Pedro has been very hard at work at that. And in particular, we have now a lot of improvements towards reading many small CSV files. So the parallel CSV reader has previously been optimized primarily for individual, like larger files. And this release also features a bunch of improvements for reading many small files and like reduce memory, have it use a lot less memory. So that's quite neat if you have a lot of CSV files, which sorry if you do. And another kind of cool feature that I want to talk about is automatic materialization of CTEs. So that's kind of a mouthful. It's a feature that Lawrence has worked on, one of our engineers. And the idea is that if you have a CTE, essentially like a view, right, that you reuse at multiple locations inside your query. Previously, we would like recompute this unless you explicitly chose to materialize it. So you would have to like put the materialized keyword there, then it would be materialized, and then it would avoid recomputing it. And it's actually like, it sounds kind of easy, this optimization, but it's quite gnarly because in many cases you actually don't want to materialize it. So Postgres for a long time always materialized these and then lost a lot of performance in many cases because if you don't materialize it, you can push down into the query and you can often execute these things much faster. So what we're doing, what we're doing now is we're actually looking at the query plan and figuring out, is this worthwhile to materialize? Can we push in any filters? Can we do, and if not, if we can't make use of these additional optimization by not materializing, and it is essentially always fast to materialize, then we will materialize. So that's quite neat. That's another thing that now you used to have to do manually and now you can do automatically. Finally, I want to talk about parallel streaming queries. So that's something that is quite, of course, DuckDB is a streaming engine. That's one of the things that make it very powerful because the streaming nature allows it to work without having to load all the data in memory. It also supports streaming directly into your application as a user. But previously, this has always been a single-threaded endeavor. And if you wanted to stream into your application, you'd essentially have to do this in a single-threaded manner. So that could mean that a lot of performance would be lost. So starting with this release, this will also be able to be done in parallel. And the way that works is that there's essentially like there's a buffer at the root that is filled up in parallel up to a certain amount, like let's say a few megabytes. Nothing too large because, of course, the whole point of the streaming engine, or like one of the main purposes, is to reduce memory pressure, right? But we can fill up a few megabytes using our cores. It's very fast. And then your application can pull data from that buffer, and then as it empties, the threads will be launched again and will go in parallel again. So that's very cool as well. For the spatial people, we have, this release also includes support for GeoParquet, which is quite cool. It's been worked on by Max, our resident spatial expert. And something that's, I think, I myself am very excited about. Next release, not next release, very soon, it's not actually tied to the DuckDB release cycle, we're gonna have dark mode on the documentation. So long awaited, long awaited. Yeah, thanks Gabor and the documentation people for this. It's gonna be very nice. We're also working on a bunch of new platforms. So next release we'll have Windows ARM support, Android, and Pyodide, which is quite cool. Allows you to run Python in the browser. And yeah, a bit of a forelook into the next years in DuckDB. So a lot of these we're already working on. A lot of these are just ideas we have. So the extension ecosystem, building that up and getting that into a state where it's very easy to build extensions, also in different languages, is something that we are really focusing on and we think can really push the system forward. We're also working hard on the Lakehouse data format. So we've had support for Iceberg for a while and Delta. We're working on adding more, adding write support to those and getting those like in a very nice shape. We're always working on optimizer improvements, in particular partitioning and sorting awareness is stuff we've been making gradual improvements on, and the cardinality estimation. And something we have been recently working on that we may actually have a research paper coming out about soon as well, is the parser extensibility. So there's some neat stuff that you can already do in DuckDB with extensions by extending the parser, but I want to make that even easier and even nicer. All right, so those are my slides. And I think we can do a bit of a Q&A, Gabor. Thank you all for listening.